Now following that, we move into the first verse. Now what we're going to be doing here is this. I've broken it up into 5 parts. In part 1 of verse 1, what we're going to do here first is we're going to pick our bottom 3 strings in an upward motion open, and then immediately after that, rest your fingers on these strings and drag your pick in a downward motion to get a muffled sound. So that's going to sound like this to play it one time in real speed. And now what we're going to do is when we do that there, that's going to equal 1. Now let's do that 6 times here to begin part 1 of verse 1. We have this. So that's 6 times there. Then what you're going to do after the 6th time you've done that is you're going to once again pick the bottom 3 strings in an upward motion open. And then after that you're going to place your ring finger on the 2nd fret of your G. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to pick the G string 1 time. After I picked it, I'm going to bend that note up a half a step, continue to press down firmly, bring it back down, and then pull my ring finger off. So to play that slowly will sound like this. Like I said, I only picked that 1 time. Looking at it from this angle, it looks like this. And to play that in real speed will sound like this. After that, we're going to form the bottom 4 notes of an E major chord. This is done by taking your middle finger, placing it on the 2nd fret of your D. Place your pointer finger on the 1st fret of your G. Now the notes that are going to be played here in this chord are the open high E string, the open B, the 1st fret of the G, and then the 2nd fret of the D. Now we're going to pick these 4 notes in an upward motion. It will sound like this. And you will let them ring out for just a second. That's going to end part 1 of verse 1. So part 1 played all together in slow will sound like this. In real speed we have this. Part 2 of verse 1 begins. We will begin this part just as we did in part 1 by playing our bottom 3 strings open in an upward motion, then resting your fingers on these strings and strumming down. When we do that, that equals 1. Now for part 2 here, we're going to do that 9 times. So to do that 9 times in real speed will sound like this to begin part 2. Now after you've done it 9 times, which is what I just did there, you will then pick the bottom 3 strings upwards, open. Those 3 strings are open here. Pick it upwards 1 time. And then following that, we're going to form our A7 chord. You're going to place your pointer finger. We've went over this chord, but I'll review it quickly. You bar across your D, G, B, and high E strings here at the 2nd fret, then place your ring finger on the 3rd fret of your high E. Now, once we form this chord, we're going to strum it down and then up and then pause. Then you're going to strum it up, down, up, and then pause. And then you're going to strum it up, down. So to run through that strum pattern here, all together in slow will sound like this. And in real speed. And that is going to make up part 2 of verse 1. So part 2 played all together in slow will sound like this. And part 2 played in real speed. Now here's parts 1 and 2 together of verse 1 played together in real speed. Part 3 of verse 1 begins. Once again, we're going to be playing our bottom 3 strings in an upward motion open, and then rest your fingers on these strings and drag your pick downwards. Now we're going to do that 7 times here for part 3 of verse 1. To do that 7 times will sound like this. Following that, what we're going to do is in an upward motion, we're going to pick our G and our D strings together and open. That will sound like this. And after you pick those two strings open in an upward motion, you're going to place your middle finger here on the 2nd fret of your D and place your pointer finger on the 1st fret of your G. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pick those two strings together, and after we pick them, we're going to pull both our middle finger and our pointer finger off the neck. That will sound like this. Looking at that from this angle will look like this. So far, in part 3 of verse 1 played slow, we have this. And then following that, we're going to form a B5 2-finger power chord here. That's done by taking your pointer finger and placing it on the 2nd fret of your A. And then place either your ring finger or your pinky, either one, it does not matter, on the 4th fret of your D. This is a B5 power chord. We're going to play those two notes together in a downward motion one time. So far in part 3 here, we had this played slow. Now following that, what we're going to do is this. You're going to place your pointer finger on the 5th fret of your A string. You're going to pick that note in a downward motion. Then place your middle finger on the 6th fret of your A, pick that in an upward motion. And then following that, you're going to place your pointer finger here on the 4th fret of your D. You're going to pick that note in a downward motion. Then you're going to pick the open D string in an upward motion. Then you're going to place your ring finger on the 6th fret of your D. You'll pick that in a downward motion. And then you're going to pick the D string open once again in an upward motion. And now that's going to end part 3. Part 3 played all together and slow will sound like this. Part 3 played in real speed. Now in part 4 here, what we're going to do is you're going to take your fretting hand, you're going to lightly rest it on the bottom 4 strings. You're going to strum down from your A string down. The note that will ring out here will be the open A. It will sound like this. Then you're going to play your bottom 3 strings open in an upward motion. Then place your middle finger on the 3rd fret of your A string. Here you want to muffle the bottom 4 strings. We're going to strum down here. It will sound like this. Then you're going to place your ring finger on the 4th fret of your A string. Once again, muffle the bottom 4 strings. Here we're going to strum up. And then after that, what we're going to do is you'll place your pointer finger on the 2nd fret of your D string. Press down firmly there and muffle the bottom 3 strings. We'll strum down. Then after that, you are going to play the bottom 3 strings open in an upward motion. And then you're going to place your ring finger on the 4th fret of your D string. Once again, muffle the bottom 3 strings. We'll strum down from the D string down. Then play the bottom 3 strings open in an upward motion. And then you're going to rest your fretting hand on the bottom 5 strings. We're going to strum all 6 strings in a downward motion. The only note that will ring out here will be the open low E. And that's going to end part 4. Part 4 played all together and slow of verse 1 here will sound like this. Part 4 played in real speed. Now here's parts 1 through 4 of a verse 1 played together in real speed. We have this. Now the 5th and final part here in our first verse, what we're going to do is you're going to place your middle finger on the 2nd fret of your G string here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pick our G string one time, and then we're going to slide our middle finger up 2 frets to the 4th fret, and then once we get here we will continue to press down firmly and let the note ring out. It's going to sound like this to begin part 5. And then what you're going to do is you're going to place your pointer finger on the 3rd fret of your B string. Be sure that your middle finger is curved so that it is not touching the string below it, your B. Now after you've slid your middle finger up to the 4th fret, place your pointer finger on the 3rd fret of your B. Pick that note one time. And then following that, you're going to pick your high E string open. So be sure that your pointer finger is curved in a way so that it's not touching the high E string. So far in part 5 we have this played slow. And then what we're going to do is we're going to leave our fingers right there where they are. Where my pointer finger is on the 3rd fret of the B string, it's curved so that it's not touching the high E. My middle finger is on the 4th fret of the G, and it's curved so that it is not touching my B string. So those are the 2 notes I have held down. The last thing we did was we played the high E string open. We'll play the high E string open one more time. And then what we're going to do here is a backwards rake. And what we're going to do is, now first I want to tell you what I'm going to do and then I'll play it. I'm going to take my pick and I'm going to drag it up the bottom 3 strings, okay? Once I get my pick past my G string here, I'm going to pull my middle finger down to the 2nd fret. Once I get there, I'm going to pull my middle finger off of the G string. And then following that, I'm going to place my ring finger on the 2nd fret of the D and I'm going to pick that note. So that'll be the next note that I pick after the rake, will be the 2nd fret of the D. Now to do that slow, it doesn't quite sound right played slow, but to do it slow, it's going to look like this. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on here. Like I said, so far in 5 we have this. You're going to pick the 2nd fret of the G and slide up to the 4th fret. Then play the 3rd fret of the B. Then play the high E. Then play the high E once again. And then following that, you're going to do your rake. Following that, you're going to play your low E string open. So the sound that we're wanting to get from here is going to sound like this. Like I said, this little rake here, I've got my pointer finger on the 3rd fret of the B, my middle finger is on the 4th fret of the G. Take your pick in an upward motion. You're going to drag it up the bottom 3 strings. Once you get your pick past the 3rd from the bottom string, then you're going to pull your middle finger down to the 2nd fret, pull it off the neck, and then stick it, and then quickly place it on the second fret of your D string, and you'll pick that note. So once again, that played slowly. And then you'll play the open low E string. So looking at that from this angle, if it helps any, it's going to look like this. So that's what we've got so far here in part 5. After we played the open low E string, you're going to place your pinky on the 3rd fret of your low E, play it once. Then play the open A. Then play the 1st fret of the A. Then play the 2nd fret of the A. So far in part 5 of verse 1 we have this played slow. After you've played the 2nd fret of your A there, you want to finish forming the B7 chord like we did before. Now once you form the chord, you're then going to strum it up and then down. And that will end part 5, and that's going to end the first verse. Part 5 played in real speed. So that's part 5 played in real speed. Now I'm going to play all of the first verse here. In real speed we have this. Now immediately after the first verse, we move directly into the second verse. And now for the second verse here, I've broken it up into 5 parts as well. In part 1 it begins, we're going to pick our bottom 3 strings in an upward motion, and then you'll rest your fingers on these strings and strum down. That will be 1. Now what we're going to do to make up part 1 of the second verse here is we're going to do that 15 times, and that's going to make up the first part. So to do that 15 times in real speed will sound like this. So that's 15 times there, and that's going to make up part 1. Now part 2 of verse 2, what we're going to do is it begins by playing our bottom 3 strings open in an upward motion. Then immediately after that, you're going to place your middle finger on the 3rd fret of your low E string here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to pick just that note in a downward motion. Place your ring finger on the 4th fret of your low E, pick that note one time in a downward motion. So we've got this so far for part 2 of the second verse, played slow. Following that, we're going to form our A major chord that we've went over. A quick review, bar across your D, G, and your B strings here at the 2nd fret. We're going to strum from our A string to our B string here. We'll strum it down one time. So we have this so far in part 2 of verse 2. Following playing the A major chord in a downward motion, you are then going to pick your bottom 3 strings open in an upward motion. So we have this for the second part. Then we're going to form our A7 chord. Once you have this chord formed, we're going to strum it down, up, and then pause. Then you're going to strum it up, down, up. And then you're going to strum it up. So far we have this for part 2 of verse 2. After you've played the A7 up one time, which is the last thing we did, you're going to place your middle finger on the 3rd fret of your low E string. Here you're going to pick that note in a downward motion. Then we're going to place our ring finger on the 4th fret of our low E. Here we want to muffle our bottom 5 strings, strum up. So far we have this for the second part. After we've played the 4th fret of our low E in an upward motion, what we're going to do then is you're going to place your pointer finger on the 2nd fret of your A, press down firmly there and muffle your bottom 4 strings, strum from the A string down. And then after that, you're going to pick your bottom 3 strings open in an upward motion. And then you're going to place your ring finger on the 4th fret of your A, muffle the bottom 4 strings, strum in a downward motion from your A string down. And then you're going to pick your bottom 3 strings open in an upward motion. And that's going to end this part. So part 2 of our second verse played all together in slow. Part 2 played in real speed. So that's part 2 played in real speed. Parts 1 and 2 of verse 2 played together in real speed. We have this. That's parts 1 and 2 played together in real speed. Following that, we move into part 3 here of verse 2. What we're going to do is we're going to form our E major chord. We've went over it. A quick review. Middle finger goes on the 2nd fret of the A. Ring finger 2nd fret of the D. Pointer finger goes on the 1st fret of your G string here. What we're going to do is we're going to strum our E major here in a downward motion. Then you're going to pick your... I had my fingers pressed down firmly there when I picked that chord in a downward motion. After I picked in a downward motion, I'm going to pick my fingers up off the board so that they're lightly touching the strings. And then I'm going to strum the chord up so that I get a muffled sound. Okay? So far here in part 3 we have this. Now after you've done that, this is what you're going to do. You're going to take your ring finger and you're going to flatten it out so that now you have formed an A major chord. My ring finger is laid flat on the neck so that it's barred across the D, the G, and the B strings to the 2nd fret. I'm going to pick that A major chord in a downward motion one time. And then following that, once again, rest your fingers on these strings and strum up. So we have this so far slow for part 3. And then what we're going to do is we're going to once again form our E major. You'll strum it down. And then once again, pick your fingers up off the board, have them lightly rested on the string, strum up. So we have this all together in part 3, played slow. Then once again, flatten your ring finger out so that you formed an A major chord, strum it down. So all together we have this in part 3. And then what you're going to do is you're going to pick your bottom 3 strings open. So far we have this played slow. And in real speed so far here in part 3 we have this. Now what we're going to do next here in part 3 is we're going to once again pick our bottom 3 strings in an upward motion. Then we're going to kind of flip this thing around a little bit. Then we'll begin by taking your ring finger. And the reason why I'm using my ring finger here is because it's easier for me to just, from this position to move to an E major chord. Instead of going from here to here, that's the distance moving from the E major to barring with my ring finger is much easier to do. So that's why here I'm using my ring finger to form the A major chord. Now that I've said that, let me play everything that we've went over so far here in part 3. Slow, we have this. So the last thing we did was we played the bottom 3 strings in an upward motion open once again. Then you're going to take your ring finger, use it to form the A major chord. Here you'll strum it down. Rest your fingers on these strings, strum up. Form the E major, and you're going to strum it down and then up. Then you're going to rest your fingers on these strings and strum down and up. And that's going to end part 3. Part 3 played all together in slow will sound like this. So that's part 3 played slow, part 3 played in real speed. Now part 4 of the second verse begins by playing our B5 power chord. Like I said, a quick review is the 2nd fret of the A and the 4th fret of the D. You can use either your ring finger or your pinky, either one, it does not matter. Play the B5 power chord one time in a downward motion to begin part 4. And then following that, we're going to place our pointer finger on the 5th fret of our A string. You're going to pick that note down. Place your middle finger on the 6th fret of your A, pick it up. So far we have this. Then place your pointer finger on the 4th fret of your D string, pick that note down. Then you're going to pick the D string open in an upward motion. Then place your ring finger on the 6th fret of your D, pick it down. Then pick the D string open in an upward motion. So far in part 4 here, we have this played slow. Following that, well, so far here in part 4, we have this in real speed. And then following that, what we're going to do is we're going to jump back into kind of our shuffle feel here. You're going to take your fretting hand and lightly rest it on the bottom 4 strings, strum from your A string down. The note that will ring out here will be the open A. Then pick your bottom 3 strings open in an upward motion. Then you're going to place your middle finger on the 3rd fret of your A string. Press down firmly there and lightly touch the bottom 4 strings. Strum from the A string down. Then place your ring finger on the 4th fret of your A. Muffle the bottom 4 strings, we'll strum up. So far here in part 4 of the 2nd verse we have this, played slow. Then place your pointer finger on the 2nd fret of your D, muffle the bottom 3 strings, strum from the D string down. Then you're going to pick your bottom 3 strings open. So far we had this in part 4, played slow. We had this in real speed for part 4 so far. And then following that, we do something this is pretty cool here. What you're going to do is you're going to place your pinky on the 5th fret of your D string here. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick the D string one time. After we pick it, you want to pull your pinky off of the 5th fret of your D. So that's going to sound like this. Looking at that from this angle, it looks like this. Now after you've pulled off with your pinky, what you're going to do is you're going to place your pointer finger on the 2nd fret of your D string. You're going to pick that note, and after you've picked it, continue to press down firmly, push it up and down the neck of the guitar for a second to create a vibrato. And that's going to end part 4 here. Part 4 played all together and slow will sound like this. Part 4 played in real speed. Now I would like to play so far everything we went over parts 1 through 4. Verse 2 we have this. And then for part 5, it begins. We'll play our top string open. Following that, place your pointer finger on the 1st fret of your B string and place your middle finger on the 2nd fret of your G. We're going to pick those 2 notes, and after we pick them, we're going to slide each finger up 2 frets. So that means I'm going to slide each finger up 2 frets so that my middle finger stops at the 4th fret of the G and my pointer finger stops at the 3rd fret of the B string. And that's going to sound like this. After I've slid up, I'm going to continue to press down firmly here, and I'm then going to pick those 2 notes together in a downward motion, a total of 5 times. And to play it slowly will sound like this. And so far in part 5 of the 2nd verse, slow, we have this. And in real speed we have this. Then what we're going to do is you're going to place your middle finger on the 2nd fret of your G, pick that note, the G string one time, and then pull your middle finger off of that note. It will sound like this. So far we have this in part 5 played slow. Following that, place your ring finger on the 2nd fret of your D string, pick that note one time. And then pick your open low E string. We have this so far in part 5 played slow. Then what we're going to do next is you're going to place your pinky on the 3rd fret of your low E, pick that one time. then pick the open A, then pick the first fret of the A, then pick the second fret of the A. We have this for part 5 played slow. After you played the second fret of the A one time there, go ahead and form the B7 chord. Once you form that chord, strum it up and then down. Then you're going to pick your bottom 3 strings in an upward motion. And then you're going to form the bottom 4 notes of an E major chord, which is done by taking your middle finger, place it on the second fret of your D, place your pointer finger on the first fret of your G. Be sure that your pointer finger is curved so that it's not touching the B or the high E strings, because we're going to play those 2 strings open here. We'll play from our D string down one time, and it will sound like this. And that's going to end part 5. It's going to end verse 2. Part 5 played all together in slow. Part 5 played in roll speed. And now once again, here's parts 1 through 5 played together that make up verse 2. In roll speed we have this. Immediately after the second verse, what we do is the entire band comes to a stop. If you recall, the very last thing that we do in verse 2 is we play the bottom 4 notes of an E major chord. Now, as soon as we do that, that's when the band comes to a stop. And then, so that's where we are right now. Now, what I've done here is the distance from where we are right now until the first solo, I've broken up into 7 parts. Now, for part 1, like I said, what's going to happen here first is basically we rest for just a second. And then for part 1 here, what we're going to do is this. We're going to pick our bottom 3 strings in an upward motion one time. And then following that, you're going to place your ring finger on the second fret of your G. What we're going to do is I'm going to pick my G string one time. After I've picked it, I'm going to bend that note up a half a step. Continue to press down firmly, bring it back down. When I get back down, I'm going to pull my ring finger off of that string. That's going to sound like this played slow. Looking at that from this angle, it looks like this right here. Then after I've done that, you will form the bottom 4 notes of our E major chord, and you'll strum them in an upward motion. Right after you do it, pick your fingers up off the board to stop the notes from ringing out. It will sound like this. Okay, so what we've got here so far in part 1, taking it from the second verse, we have this played slow. And what we're going to do here for part 1 is we're going to do that twice. So to do that twice in slow will sound like this. And that's going to make up part 1 here. Part 1 played in roll speed. Now for part 2, what we're going to do is we're going to, in a downward motion, we're going to pick our G and our B strings together, open. It will sound like this. And then following that, you're going to place your pointer finger on the first fret of your B, place your middle finger on the second fret of your G. We're going to pick those 2 notes together, and after we've picked them, you're going to slide each finger up 2 frets so that your middle finger stops at the 4th fret of the G and your pointer finger stops at the 3rd fret of your B string. That will sound like this. Now after you slid up, continue to press down firmly on those 2 notes, which are the 4th fret of the G and the 3rd fret of the B. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to pick those 2 notes in a series of upstrokes here. We're going to pick them together upwards a total of 8 times, and that's going to sound like this played slow. So far here in part 2, we have this played slow. We have this in roll speed. Then what you're going to do is, my middle finger is on the 4th fret of the G. Pick that note 1 time. And after you've picked it, what you're going to do is, real quick, you're going to slide down to the 2nd fret. So it'll sound like this. And that's going to end part 2 here. So part 2, played all together in slow, will sound like this. Part 2 played in roll speed. Parts 1 and 2 here together played in roll speed. And now for part 3, what you're going to do is you're going to begin by playing our bottom 3 strings in an upward motion open. And then following that, we just basically jump into our shuffle feel here. Where here we're going to rest our fingers on the bottom 4 strings, pick from the A string down. The open A will ring out. Then pick the bottom 3 strings in an upward motion, open once again. So far here, in part 3 we have this. Then place your middle finger on the 3rd fret of your A, muffle the rest of the string, strum down. Place your ring finger on the 4th fret of the A, muffle the rest of the string, strum up. Then you are going to place your pointer finger on the 2nd fret of your D, muffle the bottom 3 strings, strum from the D string down in a downward motion. Then you're going to pick the bottom 3 strings in an upward motion, open. We have this so far in part 3. Then place your ring finger on the 4th fret of your D, muffle the bottom 3 strings. Here we are going to strum it down. Then strum your bottom 3 strings in an upward motion. We have this so far in part 3 here. Then following that, we're going to form our A7 chord. Once you formed it, strum it down 1 time. Then you're going to strum your bottom 3 strings open in an upward motion. We have this so far in part 3, played slow. Then we're going to place our middle finger on the 3rd fret of our A, muffle the bottom 4 strings, strum down. Then place your ring finger on the 4th fret of your A, muffle the bottom 4 strings, strum up. So far all together we have this in part 3. Then you're going to place your pointer finger on the 2nd fret of your D, muffle the bottom 3 strings. We're going to strum from our D string down. The 2nd fret of the D will ring out here. And then you're going to strum your bottom 3 strings in an upward motion. Then place your pointer finger in position to play an A major chord. Strum the A major down 1 time. Then strum the bottom 3 strings in an upward motion. Then form your E major and strum it down up. And that's going to end part 3 here. Part 3 played all together in slow. Part 3 played in roll speed. Parts 1 through 3 here played in roll speed. We have this. Part 4 here begins. You're going to take your middle finger and place it on the 2nd fret of your G. And what we're going to do here is I've got that note pressed down firmly. I'm going to pick the G one time here, and after I've picked it, I'm going to bend that note up a half a step. That will sound like this. Now after I've done that, I'm then going to pick the open B string. Then I'm going to pick the open high E string. So far in 4 we have this played slow. Then place your ring finger on the 3rd fret of your B string. Press down firmly there. Here you're going to pick the B string one time, and after you've picked it, you're going to pull your ring finger off of that note. It will sound like this. Looking at that pull off from here, it looks like this. So far here in part 4 we have this played slow. Following that, place your middle finger back onto the 2nd fret of your G. I'm going to pick the G string one time. After I picked it, I'm going to bend it up a half a step, continue to press down firmly, bring it back down. Once I get down to ground 0 here, I'm going to pull my middle finger off of that note. That will sound like this. So far we have this played slow. Then next you're going to place your middle finger on the 2nd fret of your D string. Here we're going to pick that note, the D string one time. After we pick it, press down firmly, push it up and down the neck to create a vibrato. So we have this so far played slow. What we have so far, looking at it from this angle, we have this. And then next what we're going to do is you're then going to play your top string open. Then in an upward motion, play your bottom 2 strings open. Then once again play your top string open. So far we have this played slow. Then what we're going to do is we're going to place our ring finger on the 3rd fret of our B string. We're going to pick it and we're going to pull it down a half a step. It will sound like this. So far we have this for part 4 here, played slow. Then what we're going to do is we're going to play our high E string open one time. We have this all together so far in part 4 played slow. Then what we're going to do is we're going to pick our G string here open. After we pick it, you're going to take your pointer finger, you're going to hammer on to the 1st fret, you're going to pull off, hammer on, pull off, hammer on. It's going to be what's known as a trill. And like I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the G string one time, and then my picking hand is out of the picture. I'm going to take my pointer finger, I'm going to hammer on and pull off, and hammer on and pull off. It's going to sound like this played slow. Okay? So in real speed, that's going to sound like this. And that trill there at the end is going to end part 4. Part 4 played all together in slow. So that's what's going on. Looking at it from this angle, we have this for part 4. So that's part 4 played slow, part 4 played in real speed. Well, let me pick up the pace just a little bit, then I'll play it in real speed. A little faster, it'll look like this. Picking up the pace from here, it looks like this. Now here's part 4 played in real speed. That's part 4 there. Here's parts 1 through 4 in real speed. That's parts 1 through 4 there, played in real speed. Now part 5 here is relatively short. The last thing we did in part 4 was we played a trill here on our first fret of our G string. After we've done that, what you're going to do is you're going to place your pinky on the 3rd fret of your low E, play that note 1 time, then play the open A, then play the 1st fret of the A, then play the 2nd fret of the A. So we have this right here for part 5, played slow. After you played the 2nd fret of the A there, what you're going to do is you're then going to form the B7 chord. Once you form the chord, we're going to strum it for a second here. We're going to strum it down, up, 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 down. And that's going to end part 5. So part 5 played all together in slow. Part 5 played in real speed. So that's part 5 there. Now for part 6, what we're going to do is you're going to place your ring finger on the 3rd fret of your high E string. We're going to pick our high E. One time here after we picked it, you're going to bend that note up a half a step. It will sound like this. And then following that, you're going to play your high E string open. Then place your ring finger on the 3rd fret of your B. Play that note 1 time. Then play the open B. So we have this so far here in part 6. Following that, we're going to place our middle finger on the 2nd fret of our G. Pick that note. After you pick it, slide up to the 4th fret. After you slid up, place your pointer finger on the 3rd fret of your B string. Pick that note 1 time. And then pick the open high E. We have this so far in part 6. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do that rake that we've done before. Just as we did before. I've got my middle finger on the 4th fret of the G, my pointer finger's on the 3rd fret of the B string. Drag your pick up across the bottom 3 strings. Once you get past the G, pull your middle finger down to the 2nd fret and then pull your middle finger off. After you've done that, place your middle finger on the 2nd fret of your D and pick that note. So that's going to sound like that, like this, that rake. And then following that, you're going to play your low E string open. Then you'll play your bottom 2 strings open in an upward motion. And that will end part 6. Part 6 played all together in slow. Part 6 from this angle here. So that's part 6 here. Part 6 played in real speed. And then for part 7, the 7th and final part, right after this part we move into the first solo. For part 7 you're going to pick your G and your B strings open together. Place your pointer finger on the 1st fret of your B and place your middle finger on the 2nd fret of your G. Here we're going to pick these 2 notes together in a downward motion. After we've picked them, you'll slide each finger up 2 frets. Once again, that will sound like this. Once we've made it here, we're going to pick these two notes together, which are the 4th fret of the G and the 3rd fret of the B. We're going to pick them in a series of upstrokes 5 times. Played slowly, it will sound like this. So far in part 7, we have this played slow. Then what you're going to do is you're going to move your middle finger down to the 2nd fret of the G. You'll play it. After you play it, you'll pull your middle finger off. Then place your middle finger on the 2nd fret of your D. Pick it one time. Then play the open low E string. We had this in 7 so far, played slow. Then place your pinky on the 3rd fret of your low E, pick that one time. Play the open A. Play the 1st fret of the A. Then play the 2nd fret of the A. We had this so far in part 7, played slow. After we played the 2nd fret of the A, form your B7 chord. Once you formed it, you're going to strum it down only one time. And that will end part 7. Part 7 played all together in slow. Part 7 played in real speed. So, like I said, parts 1 through 7 here make up the space between when the band first stops and then whenever the first solo begins. So to play parts 1 through 7 here, all together in real speed, we have this. So that's parts 1 through 7 there in real speed. Following that, we move into the first guitar solo.